Hello, everybody. Jan Rutherford here with Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for bearing with me as I get my bearings here. Hey, I'm really excited to have on a fellow LinkedIn learning instructor today. I know you've heard of him, Kevin Eikenberry. Here is his bio. He is an amazing giver. That's what I would say. He's very prolific. He's written over 20 books. He's helped a lot of people, and it's always fun to talk to him or to get messages from him because he always ends it by saying, "You are remarkable." That's sort of his trade and his brand. And again, a real giver of content and sharing what he's learned. And really excited today because we're going to talk about something near and dear to all of us, which is the remote worker. And Kevin, hey, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you, Jan. It's a pleasure to be with you. The last time we were together in these two locations, the roles were reversed. You were on our virtual LeaderCon last year, and man, I'm so glad to be with you and to not have to do the work. I can just sit back here and
you just get to answer questions. And I'm going to flash up the book that you just wrote.
Now that makes me happy right there.
There you go. A book you wrote with Wayne Trammell, and you've worked with him before. And I'll flash that up there again. It's on Amazon and on your website and all that. And we'll get to that. But this is the hot topic today. And I'm hearing it in every conversation I'm having with my clients is this debate about, hey, when this thing's over, we want everybody here, or we're going to go hybrid, or we're going to keep everybody. And in my mind, nobody's really said, well, this is the reality today. Here's the culture that's going to support that strategy, and here's the standards that by which we need to meet. So I'm really interested in this, and I kind of want to walk through a couple things with how you got this book going. I know you did a lot of research, and it's based on a lot of your experience all over the world. Tell us a little bit about the methodology of how you approach putting this together.
Well, it goes back, and it starts with about 6 years ago when we formed the Remote Leadership Institute, remoteleadershipinstitute.com. And at that point, Wayne brought a lot of experience with remote communication, specifically remote training, virtual sales calls, and that sort of stuff. We brought that together with our leadership content. And I'd been at that point already leading a virtual or hybrid team. And so the research and the work with clients began about 6 years ago. And then a couple of years ago, almost 3 now, the Long Distance Leader book came out. And after that, we started doing more research in relationship to the Long Distance Teammate. And the largest percentage of it was in the work that we do with our clients every day and asking them questions, using some standard questions so we could categorize what we were learning. But it comes from our experience, it comes from our communication and our surveying of our clients. And it comes from our own experience of leading a remote team for a decade.
Yeah. And when did you start this book?
Oh, I don't know. I know when we finished it. I know that after, it was in March when it was basically done. And so the question was, how much do you want to say about COVID and all that stuff? And there's about a paragraph in there about it. But we started the book before that. And again, it's kind of an ongoing process, right? If you're doing research, you're trying to figure out what those things are and helping clients along the way. A lot of people, Janet, a lot of people write a book and then they say, well, now we'll go do some training around the book. Yeah. Our model is really quite different. Like we're out learning and working and rolling up our sleeves and doing stuff. And from that work, we create a book. Right. And that's sort of what happened here. And so I don't remember when we started. I remember when we finished. And I really know when we hit the finish line, which is a little over a week ago when the book came out.
Yeah. Congratulations again. It's no small effort. As you looked at this and a need for it, obviously you saw challenges out there. What were the challenges that you were seeing that you thought, boy, I think people can benefit from some insight?
Well, we were seeing challenges before most people were thinking about it. It's not like we were smarter necessarily. It's just that we were already working with people that had made the choice to go remote. before everyone was forced. If you're not in, let's see, if you're not in some sort of service business, if you're not in the logistics business or the manufacturing business, you didn't have much choice, right? You sent everybody home last March. And so we were working on this all before that time came. And so at this point now, everyone knows what the challenges are, right?
Yeah.
And the challenges are, how do we stay, while physically distanced, how do we stay socially connected? How do we communicate in the most effective ways? How do we create a true team? And we pick the word teammate purposefully, right? So the challenges at this point, I think everybody knows. And I think the other one that maybe people haven't been thinking about is this idea of, okay, we've sort of figured out how to make this viable. It's working-ish now, right?
Yeah.
But how do we sustain it? Number one, how do we get past survival and into thriving? And then for the individual team member, many of whom may be watching us, it's the question of, okay, what does this mean for my career? And what does this mean for me long-term when I can't see the boss and no one really is seeing the work that I'm doing or not? So that's another one of the challenges.
I'm wondering, so those are the challenges. I want to kind of go take a step back and, those are those challenges show up, but what's the underlying problems that you're seeing, the dysfunction, if you will, that maybe has manifested itself more so over the past year?
Well, the thing that I've been saying, Jan, and I know you just said it, questions are welcome. So anybody, please, ask away. We'll talk about whatever you all want to talk about. But I think organizations that have made this work okay had a good culture to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think, so let me back up. Let's just say last March, right? We sent everybody home, or by the 1st of April, pretty much everyone that could go home had gone home. And the initial thing that happened surprised a lot of people. And that is, for the first 30 days, it went pretty well. And the reason why is that and you know this better than most. It's a critical situation. People came together because we have to figure this out. Right. And so people figured it out, and duct tape and extra batteries and whatever. And they figured it out. And they felt like they were in it together. But if you didn't have a strong culture before that, after that short honeymoon period, it all has started to fray away, right? Think about the culture as like fabric, right? Mm-hmm. How strong is the fabric now? Is it fraying? And so, I think the underlying challenges, back to your original question, the underlying challenges are, what does our culture say? The underlying challenges are, what is the mindset of our folks? If everyone is now thinking that their job is their work, that's a problem. Really, our jobs are our work plus the team's work. And Jan, the longer we're apart, the less we think about that, the more insular we become. So there are underlying issues of mindset and engagement and effectiveness of leadership that are all really becoming more obvious day by day now.
Yeah, I like how you're describing the culture, and I've watched a couple of Margaret Heffernan TED Talks recently, because we're going to have her on the podcast soon, and she was on
ours a while back. She was great.
Oh, she's awesome. She was talking about a pandemic in July 2019, and a lot of what she was talking about was, our efficiencies keep us from being adaptable. But what I really liked her approach is how she talks about culture being what happens between people, not just a bunch of people, but what happens between people. And I think I'm hearing that you're kind of saying the same thing. That's become frayed, that people are working independently, get the head down. I do my work, rather than figuring out, boy, we all know that the studies have been done. When teams come together, they make a better decision than an individual. They produce better quality work, boards. I mean, it's been demonstrated over and over again.
And all that can still be done. I mean, I think there's some people say, well, we can't do that, right? We can't collaborate because we're not together. Well, it might be different, but it doesn't mean you can't be done. And I think that the part of the mindset problem is people say, well, we just can't. Or when we get back together. See, the problem with when we get back together is we thought it was going to be Easter, then we thought it was going to be Memorial Day, then we thought it was going to be the 4th of July, then we thought it was going to be Labor Day, then we thought it might, at the end of the year for sure. And then people were saying, well, first quarter, middle of the year. Now everyone's starting to settle into September as when it's going to be, right?
I'm on the record in February of 20 saying it was going to be 2 years. I said in February 20, it's 2 years. And I still would stand by that. I don't think we're getting back to anywhere sense of normality till then.
Well, we can have a whole conversation about normality if you want. I have thoughts about all that. So here's my point. That we can't say, well, we'll collaborate when we get back, because we don't even know when that's going to be, right? And if you're right, we got a year to go. And so I think the mindset shift has to be, how do we do it now, right?
Yeah.
How do we re-engage with each other? How do we use the technologies? And how do we decide that's what we're going to do? Again, take the snapshot of that 15 to 30 days when you first sent everybody home. And I know everyone was stressed, and I know that we can't run on adrenaline forever. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the mindset of, we're going to figure this out. And the reason people were being more successful is everyone was truly coming together. Right. And that's, if we can get that back, not for the same reasons, but we can get that back just like really good teams had it before.
I want to dig into the specifics, but I want to pause just for a second. And this culture of people saying, hey, when it gets back to normal and we all get back and everything will be like it was. My experience, I'm seeing two different divides. One is manufacturing and construction, where there's a blue collar component. Everybody's got to be back because some people are in the factories or on the front lines. And then there's the tech side where it's either hybrid or we're never going back to the office. Why waste the money on commercial office space? So that's one divide. The other one is between the boomers and the zoomers. There's some old school clients that are basically saying, hey, the secret sauce here is the face-to-face and the human interaction, which cannot be replicated via distance. Are you seeing those two divides as well? And do you think that has to be addressed before we just start jumping into the solutions?
Well, I gave a presentation to the leadership teams of two organizations that everyone would recognize if I told you who they were. And basically what I said was, let's look at the demographics here. In 2030, 64% of your in 2025, 64% of your workforce are going to be millennials or younger. Mm-hmm. So if you look like me, right, and you're thinking the secret sauce is we're all together, using your words, and we're just waiting to bring them back, I'm saying, guess what? There's a lot of folks that, regardless of age, my wife being one, she's not a millennial or younger, who once she started out working from home, she's like, man, I just soon not go back. Mm-hmm. So here's the reality. I don't care what you as a leader want. You're not going to be able to keep or attract the talent that you want if that's going to be your model. You're just not going to be able to. So we can wish upon a star if we want, but long term, and I am not saying that everyone's going to be back in the office. I'm not saying that. But if you're saying that and you're not willing to consider that we have to look at some flexible options, different options, hybrid options, if you're just waiting for the day to call the troops home, I think you're going to be sorely surprised at how many other negative impacts you're going to see.
I spoke to a very high-level person at a Fortune 500 manufacturing company last night, and he was all about creating a hybrid way back. And one of the comments he made was, leadership basically wouldn't go for that. And I said, well, can you make the argument that how expensive it's going to be if you start losing people? And he's like, I don't think that's going to fly. That might be, well, they're not loyal. He said he thinks the only thing that
matter. If they leave, they leave.
Well, he said the only thing that's going to change mine might be the fact that you can't get talent. That the first question they're going to ask is, what's the working arrangement?
Yeah.
And if you can't get talent, then it's too late.
Then it's too late. That's why this is the conversation now, right? That's why it needs to be the conversation now. I'm, we're here on LinkedIn, and we're both LinkedIn instructors. And I believe, it's not official, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I believe I'm going to be creating a course quickly, soon, about this decision and how people think all that through in organizations and with their teams. And I'm excited if that's in fact what does happen. I think it's going to. So
yeah.
Once it's for sure, I'll let you know, Jan. You can be the first to tell people. How about that?
That'd be awesome. Well, let's dig in, Kevin. I really appreciate this conversation. And if I had anything to, if I had any say so in these boardrooms and these discussions, one of the things I would try to help people that look like us understand is, hold your views lightly. Listen. There are lots of ways to get things done. So let's dig into some of the, again, I love the fact that, you're focused on, hey, what it takes to be a great teammate, not just a leader. And I know this being a great teammate applies to leaders, because that's the first thing you have to do.
Right. We're both.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the things from a skills and a communication perspective that you offer up in the book?
Well, we talk about a variety of things, and obviously we talk about how to communicate differently. We talk about how to maintain and nurture your relationships. We talk about the skill of building trust at a distance. We talk about this idea of remaining visible, but we call it ethical visibility. How do we be seen and recognized without looking like that guy who's all out for himself, right? And finding the balance about putting our work and our efforts and our results in the context of the team. So there's just a few of the things that we get into and try to dive into in the book.
Let's dig into the one that always comes up. You mentioned trust. That's hard. That's hard no matter what. So, you've got a team, and again, let's just define the team. They have a common goal, a shared purpose. They need that. So they've got that.
And hopefully we had that before, right? So that's a component of trust regardless, and probably the one that is easiest to maintain. Like if you had that before you went remote, you've likely still got that one, right?
But how do you get but if you have a shared purpose, the other part is you have to have trust for it to be a real team. So how do you, two questions, I guess. How do you create trust, and how do you maintain it?
Well, the first thing is, so let's talk about what makes it harder at a distance.
Okay.
So what makes it harder at a distance is that part of why I choose to trust you, Jan, is that if I know that you're good at what you do, like if I understand your competence, if I know all of that, and when we're in the office together, I have some clues about that, right? And I kind of might know that better than I might now. Now you're kind of like behind the green curtain in the Wizard of Oz, like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Like, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're up to. I don't know your motives, and I may not know your competence. And until I understand those, which, we believe are components of trust, until I understand those, I'm not able to make a choice or decision to trust you more fully, right? And so finding ways as a team to share knowledge, share experience, share competence, help each other, so that helps manage the motives. If we can still create those things, then we can continue to build trust. At the end of the day, Jan, I like to think about it this way, that if you look up the word trust in your dictionary, you'll find it's a noun and a verb, right?
Yep.
Trust exists. Some level of trust exists on your team now.
Right.
Noun, it exists, but it's also a verb. I trust Jan, right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that in order to build trust, I can't wait for you I have to go first. So the more of the verb we do, the more of the noun we get. So let's just play that out for a second, right? Yeah. Like if I do something as a leader, let's just say, I mean, all of us have had this situation where a leader comes to you and offers you an opportunity to do something and is basically saying, I trust you to go do this work. Well, what happens to the trust between the two of you in that moment? It goes up, right? In that moment, the trust just went up. I had to go first, but then you respond perhaps at least at the margin differently than before. Because once you know that I trust you, you don't want to lose that.
Let me throw a scenario out that I'm hearing. So, and I think people listening are going to be able to relate. Typical day is Zoom all day long, and you barely have time in between meetings to even go to the bathroom, but it's constantly. And if I were to ask anybody that I'm coaching, hey, what's the biggest challenge right now? They would say time. I'm having a terrible time with balance and boundaries. And so if we're time constrained and we're filled up with garbage meetings that are all about status and information and not about any time to develop relationships, I mean, is there any room for trust building along the way?
Well, there's like 7 things in that comment, Jan. First of all, if you'd have asked people 2 years ago what their biggest challenge was, they would have said time then too. So let's just be clear about that. And they would have complained about their meetings when they weren't in Zoom as well. So there's no doubt that there are some people that are having more meetings than ever. I'm not discounting that point. But let's also be real that some of those complaints, some of those realities, the context has changed, but they haven't really changed. So, but let's talk about what we can do in the context of those meetings. So first of all, if they're your meetings, let's make darn sure we're really having them for a purpose, number one. And let's make sure we know what that desired outcome is, and then design the meeting around that desired outcome. And the second thing is work will expand to the time allotted, so have shorter meetings. In almost every case, you can do that and still have success. Have a 45-minute meeting instead of an hour meeting, and everyone can at least go to the bathroom. Right. Number 3 that I would say is that let's go back to that time when we still had meetings in the conference room. And what happened is people started showing up 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes before the meeting, right? They finished their last meeting, went to the restroom, and went to the next conference room. And they sat down. And what did they do? They chatted. They chatted. They had social interaction. Now, what happens now? The meeting starts when the meeting planner, the leader, who's maybe the one who's going to be late, shows up and opens the meeting room. And then we have to start because we're running behind. Make sure everyone can open the meeting. Anyone can open the meeting. The meeting's open, just like you get anyone can open the conference room door. And at that moment, let what naturally happens happen. People turn on their webcams and they just start to chat. I'm a big believer in starting meetings on time, but I have shown up for me. First of all, I will sometimes show up for our team meetings before that, and I just stay out of it. I mean, I think there's a lot of trust on our team, and I think that, that the team doesn't necessarily feel impeded by me as the boss, and yet I still am the boss. So I just stay out. I mean, I just listen. They know I'm there, but I just let them. And sometimes, if there's real richness in that, I let that go past the starting time because there's no way we get it back, Jan. Yeah, there's no way we get it back.
Well, I know you're a big advocate. For at least here's an assumption. I think you're a big advocate for a big part of what you're trying to convey here is personal responsibility to teammates, personal responsibility to your own engagement, personal responsibility about staying connected.
100%.
Okay. Can you talk about that a little bit? That personal responsibility, not just they, constantly they.
Well, the subtitle of the book is "Stay Engaged and Connected While Working Anywhere," and so the big fallacy, and there's a bunch of people like Jan and I that are consultants and trainers and such. There's all that have fed this fallacy, which is that engagement is something that leaders should be doing to others, which is just patently wrong. Engagement is something we all choose ourselves. Now, can we as leaders do some things that will improve the chances, that will create an environment in which people might be more engaged? Yes. Ultimately, though, the choice belongs to each of us. And so one of the big ideas of this book is that engagement belongs to you, and are you going to choose it? And all that really means is, do you care? Right? Are you willing to put in discretionary effort and time? And I'm not saying working 85 hours and not having a life. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, does this matter enough to you that you're saying, I'm in? Personal responsibility, accountability, engagement, whatever words you want to use for it. And so we believe that 100% belongs to every person. And so the message of the Long Distance Teammate is, are you in? And if you're in, here are the things that you can do that will help you and help create that for everybody else on the team. And it doesn't matter. One last thing. It doesn't matter whether you're an employee, a contractor, a gig worker. None of that matters. Forget what the IRS says and what kind of paperwork you're getting this week.
I think these are great tips. Do you think part of what everybody also should be examining is, again, given that for some, the economy, things are stable in their world, and we know that a lot of people are hurting and suffering. Right. But I'm wondering, as you ask people to really examine their own responsibility, they start also looking at, how do my values match up to my employer, to this organization? Do you think there's also a little bit of a gut check, like, hey, in the big scheme of things, you got three options here. One, you can suck it up, you can try to change it, or you can leave. Do you think that's implicit in what you're trying to convey, that, some of you are actually going to probably not in the right place, given the new realities?
It's been a long time since I finished writing the words of the book, right? There are probably people that are going to watch this that have read it since I have. So I don't know that we say those words that you just said, but I do think they're implied. And I think you're absolutely right that, and so I'll just say it to someone who's watching us. Yeah. That is that, if you want to be engaged and it just, for whatever reason, isn't working where you are, then, maybe it's not today or tomorrow because of the economy or the situation. But find yourself a place where that can be true for you. But don't make that choice so quickly just to say, well, I don't like it here, so I'm going to go. You really need to think through what Jan just said, or you're not serving anybody, right? Then you're just flitting and flooding. What you need to do is say, what do I need in a workplace in order for me to be engaged? Can I tell you a quick story? I just was reminded of the story. I may not get it perfectly right, but the story goes like this. This farmer and his grandson are in the field working, and this family comes by and says, hey, we're thinking about moving to your town. What can you tell me about the people in your town? And the farmer says, well, how did you find the people where you left? Well, the people where we were, it was awesome. We hated to leave, but we needed to move. And the farmer said, you know what? I think you're going to find the people who are just the same. The next day, another family comes by. The similar situation comes by. The family asks the farmer, what are you going to find in this community? And he asks again, what did you find in the community you left? And they said, people were awful there. We couldn't wait to leave. We couldn't wait to get to a new place. And he said, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you're going to find the same thing here. And the grandson said, Grandpa, how can this be? You gave a totally different answer to two different people. And the grandfather, the farmer, said, wasn't about the people here. It's about the mindset of the people that were coming. And so don't be that person, well, I don't like it here, so I'm going to leave. Because if you've done that 3 times, it's not the other people.
Really good counsel. Kevin, this has been thoroughly enjoyable. It's great. Let me throw the book up there again, and let me click.
I can do it faster.
There we go. There we go. There it is. Let me change the view so we can still see each other. So, what would you like to? In addition to helping people understand where to find this and all your information for your website, what would you like to leave as a challenge to the listeners, or some food for thought?
Well, longdistanceteammate.com, right, to answer the first part of the question. And you're here on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out and connect with me. I'd love for you to do that and say, hey, I was on, watched you with Jan, and I'd love to be connected with you there. But my challenge to you is to say that don't wait for the old normal. Don't wait for the new normal, because normal's always changing. And the things that people were complaining about in 2019, they're complaining about today. I think the idea of waiting for something is not helpful. I think we need to decide today how we're going to be successful today, whether that's as a leader, whether that's as a teammate, whatever it is. And so hopefully you got some ideas today to help you with that. And I believe the book will help you say, I'm going to look at where we're at, and how do I succeed, and how do we succeed regardless of our situation?
I have a feeling, Kevin, a lot of what you get from the world is a direct reflection of what you're projecting. And again, going back to, the fact that a big component of you is letting people know what you find in them that's so remarkable. What are the other ways that people can find out more about the things that you do? Can you just real quick tell us about your podcast and a few other things?
Well, sure. We don't have time for all that, I suppose, but you can go we have a podcast called the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. You can go to remarkablepodcast.com to learn more there, see all past episodes, and figure out how you want to get connected to us there. I mentioned earlier the Remote Leadership Institute, which is where all of the work around remote work and remote leadership happens, remote-leadershipinstitute.com. And then the overall site for our organization is kevineikenberry.com. And you can see how you spell my name right there on the page, on the screen. It's kevineikenberry.com. You find my blog there, and the broader range of the products and services that we offer. Yeah. Jan, it was a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I'm so glad you reached out to have me on, and it's been super fun to be on with you.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for sharing and being so prolific.
Thanks, everybody.